You're watching Capital City Sunday.
Madison attorney Erik Olsen won the August primary, narrowly defeating his challenger Charity Berry for the second time by a margin of nearly 5,000 votes. The victory prompting a rematch against Democratic incumbent Representative Mark Pocan. Olsen faces an uphill battle in securing the heavily Democratic district. Olsen joins me on the show this morning to talk about his priorities on the campaign trail. And here with me on the show today is Erik Olsen. Erik is the Republican candidate for Wisconsin's 2nd Congressional District. Erik, thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to be here.
Erik, I want to start off with, this is not your first time challenging Wisconsin Congressman Mark Pocan. How are you approaching this campaign run compared to your 2022 campaign run?
We are trying everything we can to reach out to people because we feel like the country is so badly on the wrong track. And actually, I think it's a situation where if we're not careful in this country, we could lose a lot of the liberties that people have fought so hard for so many years. So we're doing everything we can to reach out. We're working as hard as we can. We have a great group of volunteers, and it's a long and difficult process, but we're doing it.
And on the economy and
Sure.
inflation, these are obviously two very important issues for voters ahead of November. But I want to get your stance on what would be your specific policy approach to fostering economic growth nationally and more specifically here in Wisconsin.
Well, I believe that something very important that we can do is work very hard to bring good manufacturing jobs back to the United States of America. Our manufacturing was largely offshored and hollowed out over the years, and I recognize that administrations in both parties have been culpable for this, but I think we need to work across the aisle and bring back that manufacturing and bring back those good paying jobs and realize that leadership in the United States of America has really a sacred contract with labor and with people who work for a living, that we are not just going to go essentially bend the knee to whatever corporate interests come along and say, no, we have to protect American jobs. That's part of it. It can't just be an economy where the rich get constantly richer and people who, thought that they would have a job and a pension are cut out of the deal. I mean, that's happening. And I think both parties, Republicans are now really the party of the working class. We're the ones sticking up. And that's maybe why you see the Teamsters this time around not making an endorsement. I mean, that says a lot.
What are your thoughts on the conversation around the foreign aid supplemental that did not pass through the House and Senate earlier this year? And specifically, what would be your efforts or thoughts on how you would want to address the crisis at the border?
Well, our immigration policy is broken, and that's something that I know quite a bit about because early in my legal career I did some immigration work, and it's convoluted, it's a mess. We're a country of immigrants. We need people to come here. We need people who are good people who want to participate, who don't have a background of war crimes. I think everybody agrees that people shouldn't be coming here if they're war criminals, for example. That can happen. I'm not saying it does, but it can happen when people come over the border unvetted. And actually, it's just very irresponsible to have a system in place where women and children are coming across a border in an unsafe manner. A lot of times they borrow money from dangerous cartels in order to be brought across. Then they're beholden to those cartels that they owe money to. And a lot of times they're trafficked for labor or for sex. It's a horrible, horrible thing that's going on. It's incumbent on Congress right away to fix that situation so that people have an orderly way of coming here if their participation in our country is needed or if they're legitimately fleeing repressive governments abroad. I mean, we have a horrible problem with Christians in the Middle East who are very, very badly persecuted. They deserve to have asylum here, as does anyone who's legitimately being persecuted. But we can't have a system where our system gets gamed.
This is still a critical issue that Democrats and Republicans have not been able to come to an agreement on. You have Democrats who argue that Republicans stalled the foreign aid supplemental to address border security, and Republicans are arguing that Democrats are not taking an effective stance on addressing the issue at the border. But I want to get your take on what would be the path forward if you ultimately were elected in Congress. What would you hope to see come out of your chamber?
Well, you're sitting here with me right now, so I think you feel the passion and the forcefulness of what I believe in. And if I were in Congress, or I should say when I'm in Congress, I'll work with people on both sides of the aisle to make sure that this problem gets fixed, because it breaks my heart every time a woman or a child is trafficked because of our inability to fix the situation at the border. And I frankly think that in this day and age, there's no excuse for not having done a better job on that issue on both sides of the aisle. Ultimately, we care about the same things. We want the same things. We want people to come here in an orderly way and to be part of our great country. Maybe some people don't want that, but they don't have much space in my mind or my heart. We are a country of immigrants. We need people who want to come here the right way to be able to do it. And then we have to make sure that the cartels aren't profiting off the fact that we never fixed the situation.
Republicans have shifted from a more anti-abortion policy stance in recent weeks. During the presidential debate, former President Donald Trump referred to himself as the leader of in vitro fertilization. Senate Republicans blocked a second vote on IVF protections earlier this week. I want to first get your response to that particular action, and whether you would support a similar proposal if introduced in the House.
Well, that is one of those issues, the pro-life issue, that has really torn this country apart. I personally am very strongly pro-life. However, I think that we really do ourselves a disservice when we try to use the mechanisms of criminal law to coerce people into deciding things in one way or another. Every abortion, in my mind, is as much of a tragedy as a suicide. It's a life that was there, and that life has been ended. It saddens me to no end that we seem to have limitless amounts of money to spend on bombs and munitions to kill people in Ukraine, but we don't have the money to support women and children here to help them make what many of us feel to be better choices if they would want to. Just think to yourself, if everybody who was thinking about possibly having an abortion were offered the opportunity to say, be supported so that they wouldn't have to do that, how many fewer would there be? You know, I mean, we need to look at things that way until it entirely goes away and becomes a thing of the past as much as possible, because it's a tragedy when it happens. But locking people up is not the way to fix it.
Erik Olsen, Republican candidate for Wisconsin's 2nd Congressional District. Erik, thank you so much for being on the show today.
It was a pleasure.